Hi, and our second presentation tonight is by Sean Mack and Larry Gordon, who are the co-founders of XOps. Sean is the CEO and was previously at companies such as Pearson, Experian, and Etsy. And Larry was previously at Cognizant and Capgemini. And they're going to be talking, or the title of their presentation is The I.O. of DevOps. Enjoy.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Nicole. I'm sure she's going to watch the recording of this. You guys are really generous with providing this space every month for the DevOps community here. Welcome to the I.O. of DevOps. We'll be talking about breaking down information silos within enterprises, and that accelerates DevOps adoption and DevOps collaboration in these companies and organizations. We'll do a quick introduction. I'm Larry.
I'm Sean.
Hi, Sean. Good evening. How are you?
Good to be here.
Our company's XOps. XOps helps companies run their technology more efficiently and more effectively. We build open source monitoring and management tools and offer a suite of related services to help your business. We have a really good practice in working with other IT service providers as well. And one of the big highlight of today's presentation is Sean's going to demo a tool that our group built. We got it built, a lot of it was built in Sri Lanka by our team there. Some of it was built here as well. And it's a data aggregation and presentation tool. Sean's going to take us through the presentation. Our pitch, our ask today is it's an open source tool. We want to give it to you. We want to implement it. We want to help you run it. We want you to use it free of cost because it's a new tool. So several organizations have adopted the use of it. We just like getting the data in, having people out there using it. And of course, we're improving it every day, every hour.
Yeah, at least.
Okay. Quick overview on what the organization of the presentation looks like. It's about max 45 minutes, so it's a nice high velocity night tonight. We're going to take you through the presentation, and we're going to talk about how you DevOps your data. Now, of course, we don't DevOps our data, but it's about breaking down information silos and using DevOps to change how your organization deals with application deployment. We're going to do our open source demo and, of course, questions and where do we go from here. So I always like to set the stage a little bit with our overview. When Sean and I started the company, we both brought, of course, our personal experience and our customers' experience, but good entrepreneurs, or at least as good as we can be, we went out and we did some research. And we gathered some data. So what the research told us, and we did this in collaboration with Computer Associates, which is now a chip company, I understand. Broadcom bought it, I think, yesterday, 2 days ago, for $18.9 billion. $26.5 billion in revenue is lost each year from IT downtime. 78% of downtime costs relate to the engineers not being able to get their jobs done, not being able to deploy code, not being able to fix code. Engineers are expensive. We want to keep them at maximum productivity. And missed sales opportunity. Of course, a lot of the applications now are deployed because they're money makers, they're revenue generators. If the store's not open, stuff's not getting sold. Sean came from Etsy. They got to be open in order to sell stuff. Outages are a problem. You live and breathe it. We very much want to solve that problem. We solve it every day. And I have actually, I like to do a little poll of the audience around monitoring tools that help you either predict or prevent or deal with outages. So show of hands, please. How many in the audience have 1 to 3 monitoring tools they're working with? Quite a bit. I'm guessing half. That's my quick calculation. How many have 4 to 10? Nobody. How many have more than 10 monitoring tools? Well, great, because when you're dealing with more than 10 monitoring tools, it's a big headache, right? Multiple screens. So I think people here, it is the DevOps group, we're doing pretty well. So we've seen in our practice the number of tools teams are using increasing, and it increases the time to help them. It increases the time required for them to resolve their incident response and resolve incidents. So I'll hand it over to Sean now about what we're seeing and some of the solutions we're suggesting and our customers are adopting.
Oh, going the wrong way. Yeah, so, you know, we're going to talk a bit about the siloing of data, and as Larry mentioned, oh, before I get started, I want to announce that it's Larry's birthday tonight. So I'd like everybody to give him a big round of applause.
You read that on Facebook.
I've been planning for this for months.
They snagged my info somewhere.
And he's kind enough to come here and spend his evening with us. We really appreciate it, Larry.
Thanks.
Happy birthday. I was going to bring a cake, but it couldn't fit in my briefcase.
Good move.
So, you know, we're going to talk a bit about the siloing of data here. You know, when we're talking about DevOps, we talk a lot about organizational silos and how we break those down and how we break down the barrier. You know, what I've seen time and time again is that there's also the parallel information silos where different people throughout the organization have access to different pieces of data. So you'll have, you know, and the traditional dev is looking at, you know, metrics on like security flaws in their code or errors in the code, and ops is looking at, you know, how well it's performing and what sort of response times are, latencies are. But you also see this all over the company. So the business users are looking at things like, you know, leading indicators for sales and revenue data, and the tech users are looking at how well the nodes are performing in AWS or how often you're having failures. And even within tech teams, I see this where, you know, especially larger companies, you've got the network teams looking at the only ones who can see the network data, and the database teams are the only ones who can see the database information. And really, without that holistic picture, it brings up everything, all sorts of problems. And you know, I can't tell you how many times I've had the problem where I've been sitting on a call at 2 a.m., the thing's down, and the call sounds like this, like the network team's going, everything on the network looks fine, and the database team is saying, everything on the database looks fine, and it's like, but it's not fine, right? And so what we're going to talk about is how we bring this data together so we're all looking at the same data, working from the same data sets, and resolving the same problems. And a lot of that can break down the organizational silos as well when we're looking for through the same things and fighting the same problem. So, you know, Gene Kim and the authors of Just Humble, Patrick Dubois, note this in the DevOps handbook, right? And they say, you know, for decades, we've ended up with siloed information where development creates logging events that are interesting to development. So this isn't a new problem. They go on to say operations only monitors whether environments are up or down. And as a result, when inopportune events occurs, no one can determine why the entire system is not operating as defined. So this presentation, we're going to talk about some key steps you can take to start to bridge these gaps. So, you know, I've had a history of these incidents, right? And I'll tell you about one specific one. We actually had some, I was working with one of our clients, I won't mention names, but they had a revenue processing system, one of two, that was down for over 48 hours, right? And that meant they weren't processing almost 50% of revenue for 48 hours. And you go, how the heck can it happen, right? And it happened because of informational silos. So the finance team that looks at the revenue numbers was only looking at that at a weekly basis. It was high peak time. So yeah, they were looking at it every 2 days, but not every 2 minutes, right? The systems team that was responsible for the servers actually had an alert, but they knew it was a redundant system and assumed that that meant all the, any problems with one system, sure, they'd fail over naturally to the other, but because of the way the load balancing was set up, no, it was just failing. And customer support, who certainly knew there was a problem, was so flooded with data, with calls from angry customers, they were too busy to link it to the underlying infrastructure issues. So it was a clear case in point where the informational silos really dramatically increased resolution times and impacted your customers. I think.
So is this you or is this somebody you work with?
Yes, that was me. It was back in the.
A while ago?
Yeah, back in the 80s.
Okay.
I think that was my old 386. So let's look at what you can do to begin to address these sort of things. So one of the main things, the first steps, is to really look at your data sources. Now, it's great to hear that there aren't a lot of people with 10 plus different monitoring tools. I've worked in environments that had 50 plus monitoring tools, including like 5 versions of the same one. So they'd have Nagios implemented differently in each data center, so a red alert here meant something completely different than a red alert here, and the way the alerts, in one data center it's implemented by Cage, and other data center it's named, but alerts are named based on application, completely incongruous and unintelligible. So you've got to first look at your data sources and do some rationalization and try and bring that together. You also want to centralize key data. And then finally, you want to up-level that data. And I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail here. So, in terms of reducing data and determining your data sources, so I'm certainly not one to advocate one tool, especially for mid to large size companies. I think that a lot of tools try and be one tool and say, hey, we'll do it all end to end. But having been doing this for a while now, what I've seen is that there are going to be tools that are really great at what they do, and those are point solutions that you want to use as part of your set. What I do say is look at where you have to have point solutions and make sure you don't duplicate. So like we can get in a religious war about Xenos versus Zabbix versus Nagios, and people often do. But ultimately, like, you need to say, hey, these tools really, they overlap 80, 90%. Let's figure out for our organization, what's the one that makes sense, standardize on that. It doesn't even have to be the best one. It just has to be the one that your organization can adopt and standardize on. And depending on your organization, those tools and the number of tools will also vary, right? Small organization, maybe you can get by with one tool, right? But as you grow, as you increase different teams and the depth of your technology, you're going to need to get those point solutions. And as much as possible, when it gets really complex, you want to deduplicate to define a concrete set. So with that customer that had 50 plus tools, we actually defined, I think we got down to 12, right? And that was much more rational, and that made sense for that size of a company and was an amount of data we could begin to actually work with and use. Secondly, you want to figure out one place to put your data, and the tool we're demoing in a bit will show you there's lots of different ways to do this, lots of great options out there. We brought an open source, we're building an open source tool to do this. But there are challenges here too, right? Often data may be designed with a singular purpose, mainly to feed that tool, right? So you do want to make sure you have access to that data. You want to make sure you're choosing your tools carefully, because some of them will intentionally obfuscate the data so you can't get to it. Make sure you've got the APIs so you can actually get to your data with whatever tools you're choosing. And then also you want to leverage big data, evaluate and select a data agnostic aggregation tool. So some of the tools that we looked at when we look at aggregating and bringing it all together will very much lock you into other tools in their tool set, especially with the bigger vendors. They say, yes, it works great, but only if you use our other products. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at aggregating your data, bringing it all together, you are choosing a vendor who's agnostic to what goes in there. You know, and I think the corollary here is that when you bring it all together, you do want to make sure you've got great security, and you want to make sure you can manage the access to this data on a granular user-based way, right? So that the business users have access to that swath of data that's most relevant to them. And each of the teams have the access that they should. Now, I'm very much in favor of transparency, but there's always going to be a need to protect some data from certain sets of users and make sure that people have the right access to the right. So whatever you're doing to bring this data together, you want to make sure that you do have the ability to then set users permission and whatnot. Oh, wrong way. And so finally, once you've got it, you've selected your tool set, you've reduced duplication, you brought it all into one place, you want to try and up-level your data, right? So you take it from just being data to being useful information to actually being intelligence and vision. And what that means is it's actually information that you can make business decisions on, right? So a bunch of data about the health of your nodes in AWS doesn't give you much. It's when you start to bring that together that it really provides value that you can act on, right? And there's a few different things you can do to make that a reality. One is like things like meshing it with service maps, right? So it isn't just information, now it's information about a specific server or application, right? Here are all the nodes that are related to this particular service or application. Now we know when we get information about the status of that given node or the network related to that given service, you can tie it into the actual health of an overall service. And that gets to the next thing, which is really understanding the components of the overall health, right? Which is vastly different from service to service. Some services, you know, are very fault tolerant, and it's fine if half of the nodes in your cluster in that service are down, right? Some, I've worked with some where, you know, they're very much, you've got this awful configuration where customers are tied to specific nodes. So one node being down takes out a customer, right? So those behaviors, the same sort of symptoms, have very different implications to the health of the service or system depending on the architecture and how it's designed and implemented. So by tying that to service maps, by doing health mapping, which I'll talk a little bit about in the demo, you can actually begin to extract from this mass of data and get some really valuable information to drive your business. All right, so those are a few points on how to bring all of your information together. Definitely a few gotchas that I've run into when looking at doing this sort of behavior. One is looking at point solutions, right? Every time I evaluate a solution, I say, hey, can this be someone, you know, as an operational leader, I've had people come in and say, hey, here's a new thing. And I look and say, does it only solve one particular case? Can I use it for other cases? If I'm in a multi-cloud environment, I look for tools that can manage multiple clouds, right? So, you know, if I'm looking at terrestrial data centers and they say, hey, here's a great tool for monitoring CPU, right? I'd say, okay, can it do Linux and Windows and, because you know what? It's pretty generic. We don't need 5 tools, you know, one for each type of OS. So wherever I can stay away from point solutions, I do. Avoiding vendor lock-in is really important. Specifically when you talk about data aggregation, I had some very interesting conversations with vendors like IBM and HP where they said, yeah, use our aggregation tools. And I said, great, does this work with this? Yes. Does this work with that? Yes. But you've got to also use our blah, blah, blah. So I think HP wanted us to also use our their CMDB and their ITSM tool. And I said, oh, well, actually, this company has ServiceNow. And they said, well, you can use that, but then you need to copy everything from their ITSM tool to ours. And I'm just going, this is crazy. You forced us now to purchase another product. So certainly it's something you want to be aware of. And then like what I was saying before, when you look at any of these solutions, make sure you have access to your data, very important. And ensure your tools have complete APIs. Finally, you know, I'll just say that, like I know we're at a DevOps meetup, but tools cannot make a culture of collaboration. If DevOps for me is very much about a culture of collaboration, and no tool is a tool that's going to force an organization to be a collaborative organization. In fact, I've seen some of the best collaboration tools in the world used in a very uncollaborative way. I was working with one organization and they had 3 different chat tools. Now, chat is a tool that I naturally think is one of the best, you know, collaboration and automation tools. You know, some very exciting stuff going on with tools like Slack and whatnot in terms of collaboration and automation. This company had Slack for their dev teams, what was it? Skype for their business team, and Atlassian's HipChat for their ops team. So in this way, they had used tools to ensure that these teams weren't collaborating and to enforce silos. So no tool alone can be a DevOps tool. You've got to first start with that culture of collaboration and then use tools to help build that. All right, so there's a lot of tools in this marketplace, you know, and I actually started off this journey trying to buy a tool for a company, and I went to market. I talked to a lot of vendors. I did about a 6-month market survey, and what I found was a lot of the bigger vendors will lock you into a product set or be cost prohibitive. Some of them actually wanted us to install a huge footprint in each data center. We would have had to have a team of 5 people just to maintain these freaking things. And there is a lot of cool stuff going on. You know, hats off to some of the newer vendors like MuleSoft and Datadog doing very innovative stuff. A lot of them we found were either missing key elements that we needed or were lacking scalability. So, you know, it was with that frame that we built an open source tool to address this. And we're going to go into that. So Larry, if you want to talk a bit about XView, I'll take back the keyboard.
Sure. Sean's going to go through the registration process. It's not that complicated, but it takes a little bit. So just to reiterate, we're not a monitoring tool. We're a correlation and presentation engine along the lines of data science, I think, in a bit. The correlation allows users to get a holistic picture of service health, quickly fix issues when they do occur, and identify issues to resolve before they impact your users.
Register. And
all right. So getting started, pretty straightforward.
And I think one of the things to emphasize here is that we built it as a organization-based tool, so you can have user roles within the organization. You can have, you know, different users. The business users can have one set of information, and the tech users can have another set. All pulling, like, not to confuse the subject, all pulling from the same set of data. So you're starting from that massive, the same group of information. And we built it ground up to to be a organization-wide collaboration tool?
So we've pre-configured, we already have a selection of data sources integrated, including bidirectional integration with platforms like ServiceNow. Other data sources can be easily integrated on the back end, and that's what we're asking this group for. We want to be able to integrate the tools you're using in live situations into our tool and have them be useful. We're working with others in our community to build out integrations, and we're working with our partners to build integrations with them.
All right, and so that's the full setup process. I've just integrated New Relic. It's already bringing data into the tool from New Relic, which we're using for synthetic monitoring. I'm going to go ahead and jump into another instance that I've already configured with a whole bunch of data sources, so you can see a little bit of what's going on there. Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, so the goal behind this is no more siloed data. Sean's going to show us how this particular business is performing for users around the world. I think he picked a map in this case to illustrate what's going on in the network. And you're going to show us, I think, a little bit of item health for key services.
Yeah, one of the interesting things we've done here is to look at how you define system health, because this is a hugely confusing problem. It's like, is it healthy, right? Health can even mean, one of the things we found in doing this is health can even mean something different to different users. So the business vantage point might say, hey, if it's available and responding quickly to our users, yeah, it's healthy, that's fine, we're taking orders, this is fine. From a more DevOps perspective, it may be, well, actually, we've got a bunch of nodes that are exhibiting abnormal behavior, right? That's not healthy. We need to be acting on that. So in that's a great example of how two user groups, user profiles can actually see health as different things for the same application. So we've designed a pretty flexible framework for designing system health, where you can actually identify key indicators, say what the priority of those key indicators are, and define health for a system, and then say which users get access to those health values, and set up custom dashboards based on that.
I think next you start talking about it's one place for all your tech teams to get their data.
Yeah. It's supposed to. It's not at the moment. Yeah, you know, we've got, so we use New Relic for synthetic data collection, and so what it should have is the data collection points, but they're not showing for some reason right now, because it's a demo, right?
And I think you're going to show us about breaking down it's not my problem.
Right, right, yeah, absolutely. So here you get insight into your network data, you get insight into your application level data, your database, your storage. So you begin to break down this question of where's the problem, and begin to say, hey, we've all got access to the same data. Let's all jump in and solve it together.
So they can search across all their data. All the data is in one place to determine trends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, and I didn't go into the architecture, but that's okay. It's all built on Elastic Stack, so it's built around Kibana. We've integrated custom dashboards, and you can search through all the data. So if there are problems, you can look at where your errors are occurring, get to the bottom of them, and also looking at the underlying causes of longer-term problems. You can really search back in your records. And you know, there's a lot of log aggregation tools. The neat thing we've done here is bring in not just logs, but also your alert data, also the data from any of your metrics gathering tools. You can look at comparing your log information against performance indications from your synthetic monitoring tools all in one place, search across it, say, hey, when that problem occurred, what was happening 5 minutes before it? What were the leading indicators, so you can begin to instrument your system so those problems don't happen again.
Yeah, a lot of our customers ask us, how can you help me with predictive analysis and root cause analysis. I think you wanted to talk about managing alerts from any system all in one place.
Yeah, so another thing that you can do here is actually bring all your alerts and manage them in one place here. So whether that's coming from a system level tool, whether that's coming from your network tool, you can bring it all together and manage it in one place. We've actually added some workflow in here so you can assess the issue. If you decide you can assign it to, let's assign it to Larry. You got this one, Larry?
Yeah, I'll fix this.
Okay. It's your birthday, right?
Yeah. Step on it.
All right. Well, you just have to assess it at this point. But if Larry were to actually determine it's a real incident, he can create an incident. We've got bidirectional integration with ServiceNow, and we're going to work on other ITSM tools. So you can assess it, decide it's an incident, actually create an incident in ServiceNow, manage it through whatever your incident management process is. Once you've resolved it there, you can close it off. It will close it off here. And the entire team's informed of the life cycle of the alert.
Is there one more screen you want to show in the demo?
I'm not sure. Was there? I think that was about it.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
quick overview.
Yeah, the conclusion is find issues before they impact your users, and when they occur, fix them quickly. And it's nice that it's open source.
Yeah, and so if you are interested, here's a quick overview of the architecture. So it's built on the Elk stack, the Elastic stack. It's built around that. We've also got MongoDB to manage a lot of the configuration information. We're using that in conjunction with Kubernetes to spin up containers for collection of data. As I said, we're collecting logs, we're collecting data from lots of different sources. Again, to emphasize here, those sources can be anything. So it can be your ITSM tool, it can be your monitoring tool, it could be your social media, right? Like the power of this is that you're taking information like your Twitter feed is trending, getting a lot of negative sentiment, matching that up against the performance indicators such as your synthetic the time to respond from your synthetic monitoring tools. Like that's a powerful indicator you have a problem, right? So bringing that all together and not just looking at one piece begins to be a really powerful solution. On the front end, we're using Angular and Node and integrating with Kibana dashboards. Oh, and now the demo. Oh, we just did the demo. All right. So where do we go from here? What are the key takeaways? So reduce identify and reduce duplicative data. Where you can, reduce your point solutions. And finally, determine a central collection and presentation engine. And it's really going to take your organization to the next level.
Great. So there's several things we ask people in our community to do is help us build it. If that's your, if that's something you want to do, you could find us on GitHub. I think the address is up there, X operations. There's actually real people. When you go to GitHub, talk to them, send them notes, they'll respond. They'll help you. If you want to use it and implement it, they're going to help you with that too. Very much in the open source community way of doing things. And partner with us. If you're a MSP or IT services provider, we want to help you use this for your clients and give them a better experience and more efficient tech operations. And you can find us on social media as well, at our Twitter, at XOps, and our Facebook page, where we share a lot of information, and our community shares information. It's XOps Army. So thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you all for having us here.
Questions? Oh, Sean, I guess I'm going to do the tossing.
Yeah.
I'll bet you answer a lot of
baseball.
questions.
Yeah, I'm pretty.
Good catch. He's a good catcher.
There we go.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Then it's going over there.
My question is, obviously there's times when you want data segregated or siloed. The immediate example I can think of is PHI. So in your architecture, how do you make PHI available, to someone who's perhaps having to do an analysis position without breaching any, say, HIPAA regulations or any internal regulations within the company?
Yeah, I don't know the code level segregation that they've implemented. We'd have to ask our dev team. They have set it up so that you can set up user groups related to the segregated information within the data structure, but I don't know the details of how that's in there. But
I think it goes over there next.
So there's a thing called, I think, Conway's Law, and it says something like product that you organization.
Right.
And so I can't help but the entire time I've seen silo problems before. It sounds like you're working from the top down. You're appealing to the company as a whole instead of individual organizational units. Can you talk a little bit about how you would sell that as a whole integrated thing? Because otherwise the individual organizational units are gonna tend to do their own silo solutions.
Yeah, like it's dodgeball. I'm back in high school again. I'm not out yet. I think there's a couple pieces to that. One is, I'm not saying you can't have your own tools, right? Like, in fact, you're gonna need it, and it doesn't all need, you're gonna still need a detailed network tool, right? But what I am saying is bring it together and you're gonna get better organizational value. I think the people, and I've also seen in organization after organization where they're facing this problem, that people are clamoring for it, right? I've gone into an organization, they're like, we're trying to solve this problem, right? We're trying to get all our data in one place. I actually haven't done too much convincing, but maybe it's because I'm mostly talking to the people who are responsible for shit when it's blowing up, right? And those people are the ones going, I don't care whether it's network data or database data or AWS data or your data center data. We need to get this resolved. And so I think part of the answer there is talking to the people who are boots on the ground, whether that be a traditional network operations center, whether it be a functional delivery team that's responsible for the value of an entire service. I think also more and more as we go to full stack, the idea of a full stack developer, the site reliability engineers, this concept resonates very well. If I'm responsible for the reliability of a site, I'm going to be very attuned to seeing all those aspects together and not just one or the other. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. Oh. Nice talk.
Yes, thank you for the talk. Always when it comes to metrics and monitoring, it reminds me of Pearl Harbor movie when soldier watches a radar and radar shows you lots of things coming. It's like, cannot be true.
Yeah.
So question is, like, what are your recipes around like culture and maybe tools in order to like reduce number of false positives and false negatives as well? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's called an alert storm, right? I'm now trying to picture that in XView. All these planes coming. I mean, I think we're looking at several different things going on there. We've already built in some basic deduplication, right? Where you can say, hey, this thing keeps coming. We can actually just automatically dedupe it or present the number of times it's alerted, right? So you've got, hey, this thing keeps alerting 10 times, every hour, right? The other thing that begins to get in is to the predictive analytics and looking at what is a normal pattern and what is an abnormal pattern. And we're working on that right now and doing some very cool stuff and saying, wait, this is abnormal. But there's also, I mean, you also get into alert fatigue, and there's about 10 ways to handle that. And I don't know that XView solves that, right? If you've designed shitty alerts and you're not managing them, XView doesn't solve that for you. You've got to, it will tell you that this is alerting all the time, and you look at that and you can look at what your noisiest critters are and shut them down. But there's a cultural aspect there too. I've often told the network operations centers I manage that every alert needs to be actionable, right? And the action is either you're fixing something or you're filing a ticket to say that alert sucks and you need to improve it, right? You know, because it's not actionable, right? And in that way, you actually build in operational process to ensure you're reducing alert fatigue on an ongoing basis. But there's also just analysis of all the, what's the noisiest thing, addressing them one by one, what's the most expensive thing on the automation side, addressing those one by one as well. So there's a lot of angles to that. But
So some of our clients have that problem, and they put it into one bucket, tech debt, and the other into alert backlog, and ask us to clean it up and solve it for them. So it's actually something we've seen.
yeah.
Good question.
All right.
Could be it. Thanks.
All right. Thanks again. Oh,
Oh.
one more.
Oh, hold on.
Here, I'm going to let you throw.
I'm the tosser.
Good so far, yeah.
I got good receivers.
All right, well, this seems like a pretty comprehensive product. I'm wondering where would it exactly fit into a big organization? So is it mostly an aggregator where you expect to receive data from, let's say, New Relic? But then what about all these tons of other different tools? Would they have to be written to work for this, such as Nagios, Prometheus, log metrics? And would those alerts be defined in your tool, or would they be defined then in the other tools such as Nagios and Prometheus? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And it's a good question. So the first one's pretty easy to address, which is they're all different data sources. We built integrations with just a few. But one of the reasons we're open sourcing it is because there's hundreds, and we want people to be contributing. We also see this as being driven by customers. So as we're onboarding new companies, they say, yeah, but we're using Prometheus, and so we'll build an integration for this. We have lots of different ways of integrating, whether it's by polling or by putting a collector on it, or by sending data to it, right? So there's all different ways you can integrate. So you could even integrate with a network device. You could integrate with your Twitter feed, your Facebook. You could integrate with Nagios, right? So those are all integrators. Where you write your alerts is an interesting question. We had another company we were working with, exact same question. And there's pros and cons to either method. I like to write them in XView or in your aggregator, because then you can do these multifaceted alerts where you say, hey, if the server's doing this and the network's doing this, you got a problem, right? Which you can't do if you're just writing it in your network tool or just writing it in your systems tool. But there's certainly an argument based on your organizational structure and size, based on your fault tolerance level, where you may want to put some of those in your tools as well.
As you mentioned, what you just said, it's kind of struck a note with me. So it seems like you're writing a tool which you expect to be integrated with a lot of data points and monitoring, etc. What happens is when you start solving the workflows which are very custom to specific customers, because that's basically what I'm hearing is two stories. You want to support your customers, you want to help them solve their problems, and then you want to create an open source tool. That's kind of an oxymoron because open source would have everything which is defined in generic and more of a open way, and specific customer issues usually come back with, oh, we do it our own way and that's how we want to solve it. So how would you go about that? Like, would you introduce your tool as a highly customizable piece of technology, or are you planning to, almost like feature flags on your tool to support company A, B, C? And to tell the truth, I've seen this so much. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm seeing the contradiction you're raising. Help me understand where you're seeing the two sides of it a little better.
Using generic workflows and generic tooling is fine, but there are certain companies which would use tool A, B, C, but they're going to use it in different permutations than the other company.
Right.
Like this is like very high level, but details are really. I cannot come up with a use case right now, for example. But mainly what I've seen is that companies would do certain things their own way, and they ask you to solve it. So either you restructure the company to solve using your tool, or you have to restructure your tool to solve the issue.
Oh, certainly. So we've tried to build this as open and generic as possible. It is a complex problem, and it does require a complex solution, which may, and we're still building this, right? So often you do need to customize it. But I don't think we've designed any workflows that can't, we've designed it in a way that can be customized per customer. So I haven't run into any contradictions there. In fact, every use case just make sure, every user and test company that we're working with gives us another example to ensure that we can adapt. A great example is the health equation, right? Where we say, hey, everybody's going to define health of a application a different way, even within the same company. So we give a way that users can configure that within the system. Does that make sense? I'm not.
I hope it works, because it's an interesting question. Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, that's a long throw. We're going to pass it over. You got to do more work.
Yeah, team effort. All right. Collaboration process at work here.
We may not make the World Cup.
Yeah.
So I wasn't actually here for your presentation, but I just wanted to ask a question. How about integrating it into like firewalls, like pulling information from like pfSense or something, which is an open source, and then getting that information from pfSense and then putting it into your application? Is that difficult, or?
No, it's not. We have adaptable collectors that can work on many different ways of collecting data. And I was saying before, if it's a network device, we can either, if there's a some interface, we can pull through that. If there isn't, we can receive data. We can install collectors. So we can integrate with anything that has access to its status information.
Can I throw it?
Sure.
Oh,
almost. Almost. One pass.
Awesome. Thank you so much.